Hi, everyone. My name is Hira Fernando, and I'm with Kareli. And this is a special presentation for international students in the US looking for a job or internship. And so today we're going to talk about networking specifically, all the different pieces of networking, but of course we'll touch on other issues that relate to the international students' job search in the US because, of course, this is a complicated process, and we obviously want to demystify as much of this as possible for you. Elsewhere, we cover other pieces of this, specifically the visa process, the H-1B, all of that. And I'll touch on that a little bit, but the key component agenda for this session is really on the networking piece. Okay? All right, so with that, I am going to share my screen so that you can see the PowerPoint. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. Oh, 1 second. Bear with me here. All right, okay. So just a very quick introduction about me, a little bit of background, because I think it is relevant in the sense that I myself arrived in the United States in 2002 for my MBA, which I did at Penn, and as class of 2004. And then since graduating, I've actually been on many different visa categories. I've been sponsored on 3 different H-1Bs. 2 of them were corporate, 1 was nonprofit. I've also been on the G4 visa, which is the visa track for international multilateral institutions like the World Bank and the United Nations. And then, of course, I started off on the F1 student visa, just like all of you, and went through OPT, CPT, all that. And then now I'm on an E2, which is a visa category for entrepreneurs who start their own business. And so I run Kareli, and so that's the visa category right now. And all of this just to say I have a lot of personal experience dealing with US K.I.S. and all these visa issues. And so I think in many ways students like the fact that, you know, they are dealing with someone who's been through what they're going through right now. And I've been in the US now about almost 15 years. And so, yeah, just to say that there are always possibilities and options, and you just have to know what these different paths are. Okay, and I guess the other relevant piece here is that I actually worked in industry before quitting and forming my company a few years back. So I've worked in banking, predominantly in banking. So Merrill Lynch, Citigroup, Lehman Brothers. And then post-MBA, I worked for the World Bank and the World Resources Institute. And so a little bit more on the public sector side and in the international development scene. And eventually I worked for a couple of big research houses, AMR Research and Gartner. So, you know, this is a lot of the industry experience that I count on, that I leverage when I coach students, when Kareli coaches our student populations, and usually students find that very helpful. So moving on. Today's agenda. So, like I said, networking. What's networking? I think we kind of need to define that. Why is it important? And then international students, what should you highlight? Finding alumni and other contacts. So this is a very big piece of networking, because for you, when you are in school, and especially when you're in a new country, really your most powerful connections are going to be alumni of your school. And so it really helps to figure out how to sort of find the alumni, how to reach out to alumni, how to leverage those contacts, build those relationships. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. And then, one of the biggest things that I think is important, because I see this over and over again, when you reach out to people, especially when you reach out to alumni, there are bad ways of writing these emails, there are average ways of writing these emails, and then there are very strong and effective ways of writing these emails so that you actually get a reply. So some of you may not be writing these emails because you're scared to write them, or you don't know where to start, or some of you might actually be reaching out and not necessarily getting a reply back, and part of the reason might be the way you're wording these emails. So this is kind of why I really believe in this piece, in writing strong networking communications, right? So whether that's emails or whether you're reaching out through LinkedIn, you've got to be able to, very succinctly figure out, what the hook is and how do you reach out to this person in such a way that they will reply back to you. All right. And then the last piece is in-person networking strategies. So just like it's important to, craft your written communications appropriately, it's also important to know how to deliver your message in different networking scenarios. So, you have on-campus presentations, you have career fairs, you might have informational interview type situations. These are all different networking opportunities, and each one has its own circumstances. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about different strategies in terms of how you approach each of these different. They are very different, and how you present yourself, what you choose to say is important. And sometimes you have very little time, 30 seconds. Sometimes you have a little bit more time. So it really depends on each unique situation and how you sort of market yourself and the kind of message that you want to convey. Okay. All right. So with that, so why is networking important? What's the big deal? So 80% of jobs in the US are landed through networking. And actually, so that figure, the 80%, is from a survey that was done, I think, in 2014. And my gut instinct is that number is higher. I had a student the other day tell me that she applied to 200 jobs and she got called for 5 interviews. So I'm really happy that she got called for 5 interviews, and those were all, I think, very good opportunities. And actually, I think she ended up now at this point, I think she's got the job. But if you think about, 200, it took her 200 job applications to get 5 interview calls. And so you can do the math there. I think that's less than 20%. And so that's not necessarily the best strategy, given that you've got very limited time, right? All of you are studying, and some of you are even already working potentially another job, or, there's just a lot going on, and you don't have the time to apply to 200 jobs. And it's also not necessary to apply to 200 jobs. What you need to do is apply to maybe 30, 40, maybe maximum 50 jobs. But, a component of those applications, you need to be also networking so that you can turn it into what I call a cold process. It's a very passive thing to just apply to something, and God only knows where these applications go. For all we know, it could be going to some sort of black box that HR is not even looking at. Even if they are looking at it, they're probably getting 200, 300, 400 candidates. And so the question is, how do you become one of the 10 or 20 candidates they shortlist for an interview, right? So there is only one way to get in front of people. There's only one way for somebody to know about you, and that is through networking. So that's exactly why that piece is so important. I'm not saying not to apply to a lot of jobs. You definitely should. To some extent, this is a volume game, and you can't apply to 5 jobs. You have to be applying to a lot more than that. But you do need to take at least, 20%, if not more, of your applications and convert them into something warmer that gets you the interview. Okay? So networking in the American context, the reason why I like to talk about this a little bit is because, well, I've been coaching now for about 4 years, and you know, I've coached thousands of students, and you know, we have a very, very large international student population that we coach. And I think the most common thing that international students struggle with is understanding what networking means within an American context. And typically, from what I gather, the feedback that I get, the impression that international students have is that, you know, networking is somehow not a nice thing, not a good thing. It's selling yourself is, you know, selling yourself just doesn't sit well with many cultures, and so that's a problem in terms of feeling like, I don't feel comfortable. This feels like I'm selling myself. It feels like it's aggressive and salesy, and that's just not who I am. That's not, you know, that's not the cultural context I'm used to operating in. So these are some of the things I hear a lot, and so that's why, you know, I always like to take a little bit of time to at least try and explain a little bit what this means in an American, in a U.S. Marketplace. And so the first thing is that selling yourself is considered. The word I see, even I don't like. See, I'm a foreigner, and you can tell, right? So I don't like that. I don't like that either. But it's not considered a bad thing. Put it that way. And you know what it is that people appreciate that you're able to market yourself, right? People appreciate that you're able to highlight positives about your work experience, your skills, your attributes, your competencies, and the ability to do that, and to do that in a very clear and assertive way. That is considered a good thing. Now, they may label that selling yourself. We could label it something else if that's more comfortable. But the idea is that, yes, you do have to promote yourself to some extent, right? You have to brand yourself and you have to promote yourself, because nobody else is going to do that job for you, right? I can coach you for 20 hours, but in the end, when you go to that event or that interview, you're there on your own, and you have to be able to, with ease and comfort, talk about yourself. And, we have to work out a way so that you don't feel like this is something that is awkward, because it is important, right? So the guidance I can give you is that, think of it as, it's not being aggressive. It's not something bad. Try to reframe it. And the way I reframe it is, it's about articulating your value in a way that helps the other person. Okay. So that actually is that, if you reframe it that way, think about it as, whoever is speaking to you, whether they're spending, 5 minutes talking to you at a career fair, or it's an actual interview situation, and they're taking the time, right? They have taken the time, half an hour, 1 hour, to talk to you because they're interested in talking to you. They're interested in hearing about what you have to offer. So it's almost, there's an obligation on your part to articulate precisely what it is that you offer, right? It does nobody any favors if you are reticent about it, if you're shy about it. Then how does that help the other person, right? And so imagine if you were the other person on imagine that you're the employer trying to, you have all these candidates, and it's very stressful, and you're helping them out by very clearly saying, here's what I bring to the table. Here are the 3 key areas of competence or skill that I have. And, kind of almost doing the work for them, right? Because, they may have your resume, they may have some information about you, but your ability to craft a message and your ability to say, look, here's me, these are the 3 key things that I can bring to your team and that I can, hopefully help advance the goals of your team. That's doing something that is a favor in some ways to that person, right? You're simplifying their life, right? So think of it that way, if that helps. You are helping your audience. You are helping the other person understand who you are, what your background is, and what it is that you bring to the table for that person or company or team. Okay? All right, so international students, what you should highlight. So, this is a little bit the elephant in the room that we don't have the time to cover it in this particular presentation, but we cover it elsewhere extensively on Careerly and Careerly networks. International students require sponsorship, right? So at some point, once your 1 year of OPT is finished, or in the case of STEM students, 3 years of OPT is done, then at some point you have to be sponsored. And you're typically sponsored on an H-1B visa category. And so what this means is you have to be twice as good, right? And you have to play your best hand with the cards that you have. And I know that this process is frustrating, and I know that, very oftentimes international students feel like, they are, handicapped in many ways because of this. But, what I say is, well, everybody has a hand of cards that they have to play with, right? Everybody does. The American students have their thing, and you guys have your thing. And so, yes, this is a challenge. I'm not going to lie or try to finesse that. It's a challenge because you have to be sponsored, right? So, and the H-1B also, at least at the moment, is a lottery process. Let's hope that changes soon. But it does mean that there's a risk involved for you. There's a risk involved for the employer. And so, this is a complex situation, and creates a lot of stress for people, and understandably so. But so, we know the problem. And now that we know the problem, we can find solutions around it, or solutions to work with what we have. And so what I say to international students is, you've got to play with the cards you have, right? And very often, international students overlook the unique qualities that they bring to the table, right? Because they're so obsessed with this business of, being, sort of put into this second category because of this visa issue. But then if you think about it, think about your key skills and competencies, right? Very often, international students have a technical background. Many have undergraduate degrees that are technical in nature, so engineering degrees, for example, or degrees in science. These technical skills are very valuable. So be specific, okay? What can you do well? What can you do better than others? And what I mean by being specific is, you've got to be able to quantify your value there. And whether that's in a resume or cover letter, you have to be able to give me some data, give me some examples, back it up with numbers. And these, by the way, are things we cover elsewhere as well. How to sort of make sure that your resume bullets have adequate data and numbers to support what you're saying. So that's extremely important to be specific about what you can do well. How can you do something better than somebody else? Okay. And then highlight the global piece, right? So the languages, almost every international student I know is bilingual, right? So you have English and you have your mother tongue. And then usually international students tend to have a third or fourth language. So right there, that's a massive advantage you have. And then you have international experience. Usually students, even the ones who are doing their master's right after their undergraduate, or students who are currently in undergraduate programs, you probably have done an internship or some sort of work in your home countries or in other countries. So there's that. There's so much value to the fact that you can say that you have worked and lived in different countries, that you're able to work cross-culturally, right? So this is a big thing now with employers. Employers are looking for diversity. They're looking for diversity candidates. They want people who are culturally sensitive, who are able to work within global teams. These things are very, very important. And to the extent that you can actually highlight all of this, you know, you can balance out the other issue of the sponsorship piece, right? So this is why it's extremely important that you are able to figure out how to do this through your resumes and cover letters and LinkedIn outreach and outreach to alumni and emails and all of that. Please make sure that it's clear that this is the value that you bring to the table. And don't be shy about highlighting these things and speaking specifically, as I said, to some of the things that you have accomplished, okay? So a lot of times, again, international students will say to me, yes, but that feels like I'm boasting, or that feels like I'm showing off. And I always say, well, you don't have to say, you know, all you have to do is provide the data. You don't have to say that, you know, you're a great communicator, right? You can, if you say that you have presented in front of multiple audiences and done this many workshops, or you are president of a club at school or something like that, I think it goes without saying that you clearly have strong communication skills and strong leadership skills, right? So that's a very good example of, you don't have to actually say that you have something. You can demonstrate it by what it is that you have accomplished. And again, this is why data is important, and this is why numbers are important, right? Same with so many other things like research and the analytical skills. And, you know, you don't have to say you're the best programmer or the best analytical person in the world. If you provide me some data to back that up, because you've built a model that has somehow changed something, that has done, you know, increased something that's good or decreased something that's bad, you know, so these are the ways of saying that you're effective in what you do. And again, we cover a lot of that elsewhere, so I won't go into that too much, but I think I've kind of made the point that it's important to highlight what you bring to the table. All right, finding alumni and other connections. So LinkedIn probably is the alumni databases of your schools is one place to go, and that's usually not a bad place to start. But from my experience, sometimes the alumni databases are not always updated frequently with the most up-to-date contact information, and I find that people tend to update their LinkedIn profiles more frequently. So I would say LinkedIn is probably a very good source for tracking down alumni. And, you know, what you do is you go and in the search function, you essentially put in your school's name and then the company where it is that you have applied to or planning to apply to, or whatever your networking strategy is, match the school's name and then that company or team, and that's usually how you'll see who the alumni are who are working there. Okay, and then probably the key point to remember with let me move this here so that you can see it better. The key point to remember here is actually this second degree connection, right? So, you know, there you are on LinkedIn, and let's just say that you have, you know, in this example, I've said 300 first degree connections. And by the way, this is important why you should build up your immediate connections, right? So make sure that you're adding your professors and your peers, your students who are ahead of you, students who are with you, your classmates. If you are in a master's program, remember to include your classmates from your undergrad. Include everybody that you can possibly include in the beginning, because you need a robust initial network, right? But the beauty of LinkedIn actually is in that second degree connection, because that your immediate network is connected to all those people have their own networks, right? And so what LinkedIn does is it actually opens up that second degree connections and those networks to you, right? So your peers, your professors, your friends, your parents' friends, your neighbors, they all have strong networks. Some of them might have stellar networks. And so, you add one of those people and that's, you get access to their 300 contacts, right? And so this is kind of where the magic of LinkedIn happens. It's in that 90,000 second degree connections, because you can be sure that if you are looking for, let's say, I don't know, somebody who works at Goldman Sachs or somebody who works at the World Bank, your own connection pool may not have a person that you can reach out to. But it is very likely that in your second degree connections, there will be somebody, right? And so then the question becomes getting an introduction from your connection to that person's connection. Okay? So make sure that when you do connect and build up your network, that you make it as personal as possible. Send a customized message; it always helps. And try and do it like right after you meet somebody new, right? So you meet them at a career fair, you meet them at an employer presentation, alumni panel, and this is the moment to do it is right there. You meet them, they remember you, and it's so nice just to send them a personal message and say, it was so great talking to you, and I'd love to keep in touch. I'd love to hear how how your projects progress, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so it really means a lot, I think, when you make a personal message. There are so many times that I get LinkedIn requests, and I mean, typically, if they're strangers, if they're connected to somebody that I know, or they're connected in some way to me, I usually accept. If it is somebody I don't know, I don't. However, I read the message, and if it is a very personalized message, and if it is, they're really taking the trouble to connect with me, and they're referencing something that I'm doing, I'm much, much more likely to consider adding them into my network. Okay, so just try to make sure that the LinkedIn, of course, allows you to automatically connect, and you can do that, but it helps to make the extra effort. So speaking of, I think earlier on we were talking about reaching out to alumni, and we talked a little bit about how to find them, right, through the alumni databases and LinkedIn and all of that. But once you find them, then what do? How do you actually write something where you'll get a reply? And I'm sure many of you have the experience of writing emails and not getting responses. So I kind of want to take you through a few tips as to how to make sure that people do actually respond to you, because there's nothing worse than sending emails and not hearing back from people. And a lot of times that's just because, like I said, the email is written in a way that's just uninspiring, or they're busy, or there could be any number of reasons. And so through practice now, again, after kind of working on these emails with thousands and thousands of students, and we've kind of figured out, okay, this is what works, and so we've put together some templates for you, so that's what I'm going to do, take you through some of that in a second. All right, so first of all, keep it simple, right? I don't know if you've heard this little acronym here, K.I.S.S. Keep it simple, stupid. It's a very American saying. um, and really, you should keep your networking emails, or for that matter, any business communications, any networking type communications, you should keep it very brief. And it should be very clear. The reason for the email should be clear. What you're asking for should be clear. And then there's a, one-line closing. And the reason for this is because, people are busy. They don't have the time to go through a long email. Also, just psychologically, when you see a long email, you tend to just kind of be like, okay, I'll deal with this later. I don't have time. And then it gets forgotten, right? Whereas if it's a very quick, simple email, then chances of that person reading is greater. Okay, all right. So let's start with the most important example, probably, right? The most common situation, and that is the Alumni Outreach email. And so this is precisely that thing of where you've figured out now, you've found out some alumni that work in the company that you're targeting or the company that you've applied to, and you now want to connect with them. And so this is a little bit how you should approach it. So the first thing, subject line, make sure that you say that you are, actually there's a small mistake there. So it should actually read JHU student requesting an alumni coffee phone chat. Okay, so it's a JHU, or I'm using an example from, most of the examples we're using here are from schools we work with. So so you're a student at that school. So if it's Hopkins, then Hopkins student request for an alumni coffee chat, phone chat. And that's really, really key to make sure that that's the subject line, okay? Because in the US, this alumni network thing is a big thing, and it's protocol that when that alumni reply to students who reach out to them. So one day you will be alumni soon, and you will get requests from students, and it is sort of, it's informal practice that alumni generally help the students of their previous schools. At the very least, they should reply to you. Now, they may take time in doing that. You may have to follow up. You might find that some of these alumni conversations lead nowhere. They may or may not be helpful, but they are supposed to reply to you. That is protocol. And in all my experience, I have, I generally think that people do stick to that. Your school's alumni will reply to you if you reach out to them at some point. Might take you a little bit of following up with them. That's good practice, and it's good behavior. If they don't do that, and if you follow up and it goes nowhere, well, then drop it and move on to another alumni. But they are definitely supposed to reply. So this is why it's important to say that you're a student, and then also to say that what you're requesting is a meeting, a coffee chat, a phone chat, and that you're requesting an alumni coffee chat, phone chat, right? So you're clarifying what that is, which means that it makes it clear to them precisely what this is about, and that in some ways it's almost like they know that they kind of have to at least send you something, right? Even if it is just a few lines, they're kind of obligated to reply. So make sure that you put that in the subject line. And then, make sure that you, like I said, keep it very brief but clear. So you're studying for this program, and you are very interested in, so make sure that you mention which fields you're interested in and why, okay? And so the more specific you can be about the why, the better it is, okay? So these generic type of, I love this company because you're, you have an amazing team culture. Okay, so that, I mean, everybody has an amazing team culture, or they claim to have an amazing team culture. So that's not very effective. But if you can be a little bit more specific about why that organization appeals to you, because the work that they're doing in the area that you are studying is inspiring, or because the interest that you have matches really well to the type of work that they're doing. And this is a particular organization that does that kind of work very well, right? So try and make those kinds of connections, make it unique to your audience, and really show that, you know, that there's a passion there, a genuine interest in that company or that team, okay? And then the next line should be something along the lines of, you know, you want to learn more about an initiative or project that person is working on, or their team is working on. You could also say that you're interested in hearing about what the experience has been like working at that company, or how their career has progressed since they graduated from your school. So these are, you don't have to mention all of these, right? So, and again, like I said, keeping it brief is more important than writing a lot of stuff. So pick one or two, but try to kind of give them some indication as to why you want to speak with them. And then the ask, right? The ask is, what is it? What are you asking for? So in this case, what this person is asking for is, I would be very grateful for 15 minutes of your time. Would you be available for a phone call this week or next? Okay, that's the ask. There's no other ask. 15 minutes of your time, phone call. So keep it at that. If the ask becomes complicated, like, I would like to also know if you have contacts that you can introduce me to. I would also like to know if you get some career advice on something. I mean, if you make it complicated, then again, think of the other person, right? So they're now faced with, it's difficult for them to focus, and chances of them saying, okay, I'll reply to this email later, right? As opposed to you're asking them something that's very clear, and not only very clear, but also easy to say yes to, right? 15 minutes of your time for a phone conversation is pretty easy for most people to say yes to. So this is kind of why I always recommend to students to say, can I get 15 minutes of your time? Okay, I wouldn't say longer than that. Usually what ends up happening is it's not 15 minutes, it'll be 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever. But you want to make it as simple and as easy as possible, because what you want is a yes, right? What you want is to get them on the phone. That's your objective. So once you get them on the phone, then you can build that relationship, and hopefully maybe you can, if it goes well, you can suggest another meeting in person, or something else can happen as you build the relationship. But in the beginning, this is a stranger, other than the fact that they're alumni, and so you've got to make it super, super simple for them to say yes to 15 minutes with you on the phone. Okay. Oh, and other small thing, I would be happy to work around your schedule. Okay. Now, you are welcome to suggest sometimes, but please make sure that you say that you will work around their schedule. Okay. You don't say this is when I can meet, right? And I know that seems like a very obvious thing, but you'll be surprised the number of times students tell alumni or the people they're reaching out to what their schedule is. And we've had times where we've got complaints from alumni who are, like, have you not taught your students how to write these emails, right? So please make sure that you say that you'd be happy to work around their schedule. You can suggest sometimes, but it's their time, it's their schedule, and you've got to work around it, okay? All right. So example 2, This is the LinkedIn connector email. So this is another very common situation, right? So this is where, remember what we were saying about the second degree connections, which is really the power of LinkedIn. So this is where you want somebody in your network, right? A friend of yours, a colleague, somebody that you know, who knows someone at the organization that you have either applied to or planning to apply to, or whatever it is, you want to speak to that connection, right? So this is the kind of wording that you might use. It's very simple. You say that you're applying to a position with this organization. You mention that it's a favorite organization of yours. Now you could write one more line there as to why it's a favorite organization, about, you know, something about the work that they do and why it inspires you. I mean, you have probably one sentence there that you can add. And then you say, you know, I saw that your friend, in this case Sarah Michaels, works for the Humane Society. I was wondering if you would feel comfortable making a connection between us. I'd love to chat to her about her time at the Humane Society and my interest in this position. So if you notice, this person, and by the way, all these emails are real. These are all our, either they're our students or they're graduates or clients of Careerly. So these are genuine, real emails. And the reason why I picked them is they were effective, right? These were the kinds of emails that were effective in getting interviews and jobs. So if you notice there, Emily is saying, is being very clear what she's asking her friend Sarah for. That she's asking Stephen for. She's asking Stephen to introduce her to Stephen's friend Sarah, who works at the institution that she wants to work at. But she's also saying, if you feel comfortable. Okay, so it's important to kind of give that out, because you don't know, Emily doesn't know what the relationship between Stephen and Sarah is. I mean, this, you know, a lot of times on LinkedIn, people have added people and they've completely forgotten who that person is. And for all we know, Sarah, Michael, Stephen might be, I have no idea who this person is. And, you know, I don't know that an introduction from me is going to be worthwhile. So, or for other reasons, Stephen might not be comfortable making that introduction, right? There's all, you know, so you can't be too forceful or demanding. So this is why you have to couch it in terms of, if you feel comfortable making the connection, I would love to chat with your friend, right? So that way, then they can either do that if they're comfortable, or they can get back to you and say, hey, you know, I don't know about Sarah, but maybe I can introduce you to somebody else or something like that, okay? So example 3, now this is the informational interview. This is also another very common situation where you send a thank you note after you have met with somebody. So this is, you know, you have now gone and had the phone chat with the alumni, or the coffee chat with the alumni, or whoever, whatever other contact. And this is post that situation, and now you have to send a note to thank them for their time. So this is critical that you do this. I think at this point, I think everyone's being coached to send a thank you note, and I think 99.9% of students do send thank you notes. The only thing is, out of that 99.9, 90% send a thank you note that just says, thank you, it was very nice to meet you, and, you know, maybe a little bit more than that, and that's about it. So my recommendation, if you want to stand out from everybody else, is to take this as an opportunity to continue to impress the person that you met. So don't just send your regular thank you note. I would recommend that you put in a little bit more effort and write something like what we have put together here. And so there are lots of things you can do. You can, you can talk about, you can pick up on any thread that you discussed during this conversation, right? So you could pick up on something that person said and say, oh, it's interesting that you mentioned this. I read this article, and, I'm attaching it for you here. And, the idea here is it's not just a thank you note. It's, number one, like I said, making that extra effort so that it's a way of impressing the other person. But number two, remember, you kind of want to keep this relationship going, right? So if you send just a thank you for meeting with me, well, then that's almost, you're kind of that, you're shutting down that relationship in some way, right? Or at least you're not building it. So whereas if you do something like this, where first of all, you thank them for the advice they gave you or the insights they gave you, and again, be specific. Okay, try to say, I had thought this, and what you said confirmed a lot of things I was thinking about this. Or conversely, I was under the impression that this is what happens in this area, and the conversation today was very enlightening. You helped me see things from a different perspective, and I learned a lot. So, but again, the point is, you're being specific to your discussion and why you found that discussion valuable. And then if you looked at the second paragraph, that's that piece of, you mentioned something, and, well, I read something that I think you might find interesting. Or what's awesome is if you can get hold of something that would be useful to that person that they may not have access to, and, you share that, it's a great thing you can do, right? Because again, this is a relationship you're trying to build. So you also have to provide some value, right? Now they have provided value for you by meeting with you for a half an hour or whatever, and, given you some information. And so this might be, if you're in the position, I know not everybody's in this position, but if there is something, like your school may have published research or is about to publish research, or there's something that you have access to that that person doesn't, but that would be valuable to that person, that would be interesting to that person, that, providing something like that would be great. And then you just say, you'd love to stay in touch and thank you for your time. And that's how you do that. So this allows you now, a few months down the road, you can now continue this conversation and keep building this relationship. It's not just a thank you note, right? It's now a lot more than that, because you've added some value. You're continuing the conversation. Okay. All right, so in-person networking strategies. So this is basically where, now this is kind of beyond the writing piece and the alumni outreach and all of that. And this is kind of the real life in-person networking scenarios that are common in your world. So there are coffee chats, informational interviews, right? That's the example that we just talked about. There are networking events, conferences, happy hours. There's on-campus employer presentations. There's on-campus alumni panels. There are career fairs and job search fairs that may take place on campus, or they could be just in the larger community and maybe outside of campus, but still it's a career fair that you might be interested in. So these are all networking opportunities that you could potentially go and meet people and inquire and find out about internships and full-time jobs. So I'm going to just go through a few of these, only because I kind of want to show you that these situations are different. And because they're different, you kind of have to approach it in a different way. And there are different strategic pieces that you highlight, right? So coffee chat is an informational or an informational interview is, it's a short conversation between two people that have shared interests, right? So there's already quite a lot of buy-in. And, while it's not a formal job interview, it's actually pretty close to that in reality, because it's still set up in that way, and it's your chance to get in front of a potential hiring manager or other contact at that firm that you want to get a job at or that you have applied to. So in some ways, it is, I always say like informationals are like, it's a surreptitious way of, getting in front of these people short of getting a formal interview, right? So I would say treat it as seriously as you would a formal interview, except the one big difference, and it is one very important difference, is that the informational interview is led by you, right? You lead the conversation. You're the person who requested this coffee chat, and the other person agreed to give you their time. So it's up to you to have an agenda. It's up to you to prepare what kind of questions you're going to ask, and it's up to you to lead that conversation. Okay, so this is very important. I mean, I've had times where people reach out to me and they want to talk about whatever, and then they don't really ask the questions that they need to ask, and then it's awkward because I'm not, I'm there to answer your questions, but I'm not, I'm not there to take the lead. I'm not there to, unless of course I request it. Sometimes potential employers request informational interviews as well from students. That's a different situation because, again, if they are requesting it, then sure, they'll be leading the conversation a little bit more. But I think in most cases that we're talking about, you're requesting this, right? So it's incumbent upon you to do the preparation, have good questions. You should have researched the company, the team, the team's latest transactions or the latest initiatives that they're working on. You should have researched that person, right? You should have definitely checked out their LinkedIn profile, Google them, and found out as much information as possible. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. I mean, whatever is publicly available and whatever you can find, because your goal is to, to ask interesting, compelling questions, right? That are interesting to that person. So the more you can, again, I always keep going back to this word, the importance of being specific. I wish I had another word because I feel like I keep repeating only that word. But the more specific your questions can be, the more specific the objective that you have for this conversation and the kind of leadership you can take, the better it is. It'll create a very good impression, and it will also give you valuable information, right? If you ask the right questions. So please, if you are lucky enough to get a coffee chat or an informational interview with an alumni at an important institution, don't waste that opportunity by, just asking questions like, oh, so what's it like to work here? Or, questions like that, It's just, I mean, that's okay. I understand what's it like to work here, but you've got to be more specific. There we go again, specific. You've got to be a little bit more, your questions have got to be, you've got to do the research, right? It's a little bit like one of your class projects, and, you put some thought into it and put some effort into it and come up with some good questions that you want to ask about the work that those people are doing, about the work that that person is doing. And make sure that you really make a good impression. And one of the ways of doing that is by asking really good questions, and make sure that you get the information that you want, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, this is for you to get the information that you want. So don't be shy about sort of using the opportunity and gaining as much knowledge as possible. Okay. So the next example is the on-campus, OCR is on-campus recruiting. And so, the employer presentations, alumni panels, this is very, very common. A lot of this happens in the fall semester. There's a little bit of this activity going on in the beginning of the spring semester as well. And it's a very, very good opportunity to connect with specific employers and alumni from your school. And, they are there to kind of give you an insider edge. They usually try to give you a little bit more information. And so, one thing you can do is you can sort of leverage that situation to then set up an informal interview or a coffee chat or something like that, right? So you meet the person, make the connection, chit chat with them a little bit after the event, after the presentation, after the panel, get their business card, write them an awesome thank you note, and then request, whether you can swing by their office and chat with them for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And that's how you build these relationships. That's how you network and get to know these people, and they get to know you. And that's the whole point, right? It's the relationship that's important here. Okay. So I know you're probably seeing the word teammate there, delivering and engaging teammate. So we're gonna get there in a minute, and I'll talk about that. Teammate stands for tell me about yourself. But let me just finish the different situations, and then we'll get to that. So career fair, job fair, that's the other common situation. These are large events, right? So you have a lot of employers, a lot of recruiters, a lot of third parties. Sometimes, there are vendors there as well. And so a lot of people trying to give a lot of information to, many students. And so if you've ever been to one of these career fairs, either ones that are sponsored by your school or ones that are taking place on campus, or simply just, as I said, job fairs that are in the community, these are some pretty, there's just thousands of people milling about, and, the atmosphere is pretty intense, and you don't really get a chance to have a deep and meaningful conversation with anybody. Now, it can happen, but usually it's much more a question of, everybody's meeting a lot of people, and it's kind of like a production line, and it's just, the employers are trying to speak to as many students as possible. Students are trying to speak to as many employers as possible. So really, I think the best way you can handle this is try to know who's attending in advance, and then try and have a sort of a targeted group of companies that you're going to go speak to, because I feel like, at least in my experience, going to these things and then trying to hit 100 employers, I don't know. I don't know that that's the best. I think then if you spread yourself too thin, I would recommend know who's attending, which companies are attending, who is attending, who's representing those companies. Like, actually have names of people, and look them up on LinkedIn, and then be kind of a little bit more prepared in terms of, okay, I have this amount of time, and these are the people I'm going to target. And so that way you actually can try to have a bit more of a, longer conversation with them. Now, like I said, the way it's set up, it's not conducive to that, but try. If you already know who you're targeting, I mean, this is kind of what I've done when I personally don't like conferences, and I don't like these big events. But if I ever went to one, and there would have to be a very good reason, then I kind of would know in advance, okay, these are the 20 people that I want to speak to, and I'm going to do my best to try and have a long conversation with those people, right? So there's always little ways. I mean, you try to sit next to them at lunch, or, I don't know, catch them on their way to the bathroom, or no, I'm not saying that you should accost them in the bathroom. What I'm saying is, there are ways of striking up a conversation. And, if you can talk about something interesting or nice, or you can get the conversation going, you can end up, I've ended up having 30-minute conversations, even in these situations. And, the person they're going to remember is the person they had the 30-minute conversation with, or the 1-hour conversation with over lunch, right? They're not going to remember the hundreds of people they met and exchanged business cards with for 5 minutes. So not easy. My preferred strategy is always one of developing close relationships with few people, as opposed to hitting 200 people and getting their business cards. But that's different people have different preferences. Whatever works for you, right? So the only point I'm trying to make is that the career fair is not particularly conducive to my kind of personality, but there's still ways in which, if you are the kind of person who prefers these quiet conversations that are real and meaningful, there are ways to try and find those little pockets. Okay? All right. Well, we're almost getting to the end of this presentation. So tell me about yourself. So this is the introductory question at the beginning of pretty much any conversation where somebody does not know you, right? If you are meeting somebody for the first time, and this can happen at a cocktail party, it can happen in your personal life, it can happen, you're at a bar, you're at a happy hour, it can also happen at these conferences, it can happen at more traditional employer presentations and alumni panels. It's also the starting question to every single interview, right? So it's extremely important, right? And so that's where we have the acronym TME, tell me about yourself. And it's critical. It seems like such an innocuous thing. So tell me a little bit about yourself. But it's anything but innocuous, because your response to that question is pretty much going to set up the scene for everything else after that, right? Because whatever you say, however you present yourself, that's going to be the baseline, right? So that's why it's important what you pick to highlight and what you pick to say about you in these different situations. Right, so I already talked about this, right? It's the single most common question in a networking conversation. Frankly, it's the single most important conversation in any question, in any conversation where you don't know the other person. Establishes the first impression, sets the tone, but more than anything else, it allows you to position yourself, okay? So, I could, for example, do a TME where it is about, it's about my experience in finance and working for these banks, and, I could sort of kind of focus on that. In a different situation, I might, skim over that and really just talk about being a coach, being a career coach, and working with students and universities and, that sort of thing. In a completely different situation, I might want to highlight, the most important thing I might want to highlight is that, I run this small business, and, we're trying to grow this business, and at the moment we have created a new platform and a new product, and, I might start with that and then back into these other things, right? So sometimes, depending on the audience, like for example, today, if you noticed with my presentation to you guys, because you're international students, and this is a presentation to international students, if you noticed, I talked about my international, I'm a foreign national in the United States, and I have been on all these different visa categories, right? So in my introduction, I included that because it's relevant to you, and it's a way for us to find common ground. Now, I could be doing this exact same presentation, a networking presentation, but it's not to international students, and I don't think I would talk about that, right? Because it's not relevant, and why would I highlight the foreign nationality and the, unless it's, I don't know, I mean, it might add something to my background. It makes me more global and all of that. But, I think if I did a networking presentation to non-international students, I would not be speaking about that piece. So you see how even in my own introduction to you, you saw what I highlighted, right? So, and there was a reason for that. So this is kind of why it's really important that you learn how to do TMEs for different scenarios. And I always say that, you'll know you're very good at this if you can essentially, take you, right? So it's like I say, you have all these experiences, your undergraduate, your graduate degree, you have different skills and attributes, and there's you. That's the clay. So you should be able to mold this clay into all kinds of different people, right? I mean, there's a central you, but the way the other person perceives this thing that you build with the clay, if you're very good at this, you should be able to market yourself to 5 different positions that are completely different, right? So, get some practice with this. See if you can change your teammate, not only according to the different scenarios that we're talking about, but can you change your teammate and be effective for 3 completely different positions? Because if you can do that, and if you are effective and you convince the other person, that means that you got it, right? You know how to market the right attributes to the right people. Okay. So there are 2 versions that, I mean, this is not a science, it is an art, but I like to try to simplify things, and Careerly is very big on methodologies and frameworks and things like that, because I feel like our students, this is what they're usually missing, and especially with international students who might be really, trying to get their head around, what all this is. I mean, to you, I understand. I mean, just the networking and pretty much everything I'm talking to you about it's like, already like trying to learn a, foreign language. So this is kind of why we try to simplify things and try to give you frameworks and examples and, just versions of things. Now, it doesn't mean that there's only 2 versions of a tell me about yourself, but we've boiled it down to a very short version, what we call it like a 30-second version, which is a lot like an elevator pitch. I don't know if you've heard that phrase, elevator pitch. What that means is, 30 seconds is apparently the amount of time it takes to ride the elevator, I don't know, in a tall New York building. And imagine if you were in the elevator with the CEO of some big company or something like that, and there you are, there he is, and how would you what's your elevator pitch, right? What can you say in 20 or 30 seconds to get some kind of interest where that person wants to talk to you more and carry on that conversation? So these kinds of situations are, as I said, the elevator, but also bars and conferences and these large events where you are essentially very quickly meeting people briefly. So that's kind of where you need to learn that short version. And then there's a 2-minute version. 2 to 3 minutes really is okay, and that's really more you're telling your story. And that's appropriate for informational interviews. And certainly every single formal interview is going to start with, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Take me through your resume. Tell me a little bit about your background. This is the same thing. I mean, it's essentially that same question. And in that scenario, you have about at the bare minimum, you have about 2 minutes. It's okay to even take about 3 minutes because, it's the start of a formal meeting. It's the start of a formal conversation. So taking the time to tell your story is okay in that regard. So in that 30-second version, you don't have too much time. It's just a top-line introduction and maybe just, how many years of experience you have and in what industry and what you want, why you're there, okay? And in the 2-minute introduction or 3 minutes, if you like, you have the time to, so you will still do your top-line introduction, which actually is very important because anytime you introduce yourself to somebody, you've got to give a top line introduction, right? You've got to say, I'm so-and-so, and I have, I have 5 years in finance, and I am currently a student at Hopkins studying for an advanced degree in applied mathematics, right? Or I am a student, an undergraduate majoring in marketing. And I've done some internships that are related to marketing and data analysis, and I'm currently looking for an internship. There's got to be a top line introduction of who you are, right? So maybe name, school, or if you're out of school, where you recently graduated from, and the years of experience and the industry. That's really, really important. Now, in the 2-minute version, what you do in addition is that you can talk about your skills and competencies, right? So the clever way to do this is look at the job description, right? And or in a version where it's more like an informational, you can still kind of figure out, right, what these people are looking for or what sort of candidate they value. And figure out, like, okay, what are the 3 things that they would like to hear? And then you think about your profile. What are the 3 things that you bring to the table? And then try to see if you can make as close a match as possible, right? It doesn't work if, if what these people are looking for is completely different to what you bring to the table. Well, I mean, that should be a clue that maybe that's not the right role for you. But typically there's, you're there because there is some kind of match, right? That's why you've been called for that interview, or that's why even the informational is happening, because there's enough to go on that there is some kind of potential match on potential interest on both ends, right? So try to see if you can closely match. Think about the 3 attributes that the person on the other side of the table might value. Think about what you bring and try to finesse that to match what they're looking for. Okay? And again, by the way, we have lots and lots of video content on exactly how to go about this, and we have it broken down by industry. So it's very difficult to kind of cover this just, in this short space of time that we have, but I just kind of want to get across the point that, try to use the team as a way of talking about the attributes that are important to your audience, right? It's a lot like, it's a bit like this, right? If there's a pen and, I'm trying to sell this pen to you, then if I know what attributes you value in this pen, then I can speak to those attributes, right? So if I know that you value price and you value, you're looking for something cost effective and I don't know, it's really important that it's this color, then I can try to match selling what I bring to the table to what you want. On the other hand, if I know that this person wants, they don't really care about price, they're price insensitive, they want something very special, something very unique. They don't really care about the color, but they really want this whatever this thing is called, that point to be really sharp, or I don't know, whatever. Pens have all kinds of attributes, right? Just like people. So your job is to, try and be a little bit intelligent about what is it that they want and what do you have, and then try to kind of close that gap and bring that together for your audience. Okay? So we have here a couple of examples. I'm just going to leave that on the screen there so that you can see. And, the 30-second version honestly doesn't allow you much, right? So you've got to be pretty brief, and it's kind of, it is a little awkward, and but you've kind of got to, I would say the way to, just smile and try and just, try and make it into a real authentic conversation, and try and get across 2 or 3 important pieces of information. I don't think you can do much more than your school, your degree, and however many years of experience you have in whatever industry. That's pretty much all you can really do in these situations, which is kind of why it's important to get the business card, then follow up, remember what we said about the thank you note, and the thank you note is a chance for you to say a lot more and build that relationship. And then we have the 2-minute example. And again, like I said, this is just writing it out is, it's kind of awkward. I mean, I wouldn't memorize this and use it as, if you really want to see how teammates are done, then you should watch our videos, and we have team videos of this, and then you can see in action what it looks like. But I tried to, for the purposes of this presentation, I've kind of tried to write it out, and it kind of feels static. But you get the idea. The point is, in this scenario, you get to highlight, like I said, that important piece, the skills. So if you see with this candidate, what they're highlighting is they're highlighting that they have, so number one, they're highlighting they have strong finance skills, right? Which is backed up by the fact that their current job at Citi, the fact that before business school, they worked in the finance industry already, and they also got an MBA. So that clearly shows that, the finance skills are strong. But then the second thing he says is he does have a broader set of analytical and data skills, because it's not just the finance piece, right? It's possible that in this case, the job he's applying to, it could be, they might want finance skills, but they might want like a broader analytical type of set of skills. And then if you notice, he goes on to talk about clients. So in this particular, I actually remember this student. So it's because, they wanted client service skills, client relationship skills, because this was a client-facing role. It was an external-facing role, right? So it was very important to work with clients. And so he mentions that that clients have generally liked his approach. And so he puts it in that way, rather than saying, I have great client skills. And, he says, clients have liked my approach and, willingness to solve problems. And so, if I was doing this in real life, I might give an example or two of how that happened. Or he would have covered that in his cover letter or resume or something, and shown how, he has good client skills and he has solved some pretty important problems for clients. Okay. So really, that is it from us today. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be asking about, because we did cover, I did share with you a lot of email template teammate examples. And this is a big, we really do believe in this, kind of method of like the methodology and the frameworks, I think, are very important for students, and especially for international students, because very often you kind of don't know where to start. So I'm happy to give you the, all the material that you just saw. I'm happy to share that with you. So if you want to do that, go to KareliNetworks.com, register. Registration shouldn't take that long. Register, and then send me an email at hirafernando@kareli.co, and then I'll send you the material. The reason is because very soon, a lot of the material that I'm sharing with you here is going to be part of a subscription model, and there'll be costs to that. So don't wait too long. I think we're going to be, that's happening around the 20th of April. So if you want this material and you want me to get that to you, and I'm happy to do that, go to KareliNetworks.com, register as a student, send me an email, and I'm giving you my personal email there, and I'll get this to you. Please try to do this before the 20th of April, because I don't know what's going to happen after that, because once they put all of this, all our content is now owned by this new entity, and we can't, it's then we won't be able to kind of pull things off, and I can't do whatever I want. So but right now I'm able to help you out. So please go. I'd be happy to give these are our intellectual property and our templates, but I'm happy to give you all of that. So I hope this was helpful, and hopefully we will see each other again, either in another webinar or maybe a presentation at your school, or maybe in the individual coaching or something like that. But just, thank you for listening. I hope this was helpful. And And, I just want to say that we really, we work with a lot of international students, and, it is, it's, international students have a special place in my heart because I was one, and I've traveled the path, and I'm still here in the US, 15 years later. And I really do believe that international students bring these unique attributes. And I do believe the world is, the world is changing. And I think employers are looking for a talented global workforce. And you, as an international candidate, you have a lot to offer. And I think your value is tremendous. And so we're on your side, and we're here to help you. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you soon.